Hello chess enthusiasts, my name is Miha and welcome to my chessrealm YouTube channel. So after a short break we are continuing with analysis of the games, and I found an interesting game from this year's Sharjah Masters in the round 3 duel between Vladimir Fedoseev and Salem Saleh. Let's see what happened. Vladimir Fedoseev had white pieces and he started with d4, knight to f6, c4, g6, h4, d6, knight to c3, knight from b goes to d7 and queen to c2, and we have some sort of Indian defense. White tries to harass the black on the king side already in the opening. c5 was played, striking the center. White continues with d5, a6, e4, and now b5. And here black has decided to sacrifice the pawn. As you can see, pawn on b5 is twice attacked, once defended, so c-pawn captures on b5. Black doesn't recapture and plays bishop to g7. And white continues with b-pawn captures on a6. Black castles king side and now h5. White is trying to open files in order to start an attack on the king, but maybe this is premature. White still didn't develop his pieces, so cannot start an attack yet. So black captures pawn on h5. And now g4. Knight from h goes back to f6, g5, knight goes back to h5, and now bishop to e2, targeting knight on h5. Black doesn't care and captures pawn on a6. And now bishop captures knight on h5, g-pawn recaptures on h5. Rook can of course capture defenseless pawn on h5, but after Rook would capture on h5, then knight to e5 is a very strong move. Preparing to deploy the knight on d3, harassing white king, it would be quite unpleasant. So f4 was played, preventing this knight to e5 jump. Well, black is maybe a pawn down, but white still didn't castle, so black is actually the one with good chances for counterplay. e6 was played, trying to break the pawn structure in the center. White naturally doesn't go for it. Knight from g goes to e2 was played, and queen goes to e8. Black has a simple plan to protect pawn on h5. If rook captures on h5, then f5 is quite unpleasant. Rook is under attack, and here black has a lot of opportunities to open the game. As you can see, black king is pretty much safe here, so white would be in trouble. Okay, so white plays d-pawn captures on e6, f-pawn recaptures. Again, h5 pawn is protected. White plays knight to g3, double attack on this pawn on h5. But black doesn't care and strikes with a nice piece sacrifice. Knight goes to e5. Again threatening unpleasant knight to d3 or even knight to f3. So white more or less has no other options but to accept the sacrifice, so f-pawn captures on e5, bishop recaptures, attacking the knight on g3. Well, removing the knight is a bad option, and capturing this pawn on h5 is even worse. After knight captures on h5, and queen simply recaptures. And if rook grabs the queen, then rook goes to f1, check king to d2, and bishop to f4 is checkmate. Okay, so in the game, queen to g2 was played, defending the knight. Rook goes to b8, targeting this pawn on b2, keeping the bishop on c1 or queen on g2 to his defense. Now knight captures on h5, queen goes to g6, bishop goes to d3. White is preparing to castle queen side, and here black had a nice move at his disposal, and that is bishop to d3. After bishop to d3, okay, that doesn't stop the castling, but if white would castle queen side, bishop on d3 would be attacked, but then bishop would capture knight on c3, and that would be a very strong move. Now here b-pawn cannot recapture because then rook would go to b1, check, king to d2, rook to b2, and there goes our queen. And if here white would capture the bishop on d3 with rook, Then rook would capture on b2, then again attacking the queen, preparing rook to a2 with a very strong attack. In the game, d5 was played, preparing d4, forking both pieces. White cannot capture pawn on d5. Now let's see. After e-pawn captures on d5, then bishop captures on c3. B-pawn would recapture on c3 and rook to b1 check. If king goes to d2 immediately, then queen to d3 is mate in 1. And if rook would capture on b1, then simply queen would capture on b1 check. King to d2 is the only move, then queen to b2, and there goes our queen. Moreover, it's mate in 12 moves, but I'll leave it for you to find it. Okay, so in the game, white castles queen side. And now, of course, black plays d4, forking both pieces, and black is, of course, preparing to recapture a piece. But white doesn't seem to care. Rook from d goes to g1, protecting the queen, preparing a very unpleasant knight to f6 jump. So here black has two options of capturing. The correct continuations toward an equal game would be to capture the bishop. Now let's see. If d-pawn would capture bishop on e3, then knight to f6 check. Now there's no point in running away with king. After king to f7, rook to h7, king cannot go anywhere, so queen has to capture the rook. King to h8 would also be a mistake, because pawn on h7 is twice attacked. Again, black loses decisive material. So here black would have to capture this knight, and black would have to be very careful. For example, if bishop would capture knight on f6, then g-pawn recaptures. Queen captures queen on g2. Rook recaptures check. If king goes to h8, then rook to g7, and mate is coming on h7. So after king would go to f7, then e5, supporting pawn on f6. This pawn on h7 is going to be captured. White would control the 7th rank, and with only a pawn up would be in a winning position. And of course rook to h8, defending the pawn on h7 doesn't help. Then simply rook to g7, king maybe to f8, and then knight to e4. Nothing can stop the knight from going to e6, and white is totally dominating here and would win. Okay, let's go back to this position where we check the continuation with bishop capturing the knight. The correct continuation for black would be if rook would capture on f6, g-pawn recaptures, queen captures on g2, rook recaptures on g2 check, king to f7. Yeah, white is exchange up, but black has bishop pair and a good chances to draw the game. Let's see, for example, if white would want to protect this pawn on f6 with rook to h6, then bishop to d3 is a very tricky move. If white makes a random move, let's say a3, then bishop captures on c3, and if b-pawn captures on c3, then rook to b1 is checkmate. So here white would have to play rook to g7, king to f8, and rook from h to h7, of course threatening mate on h8, but black would capture pawn on f6 with bishop, then rook to f7, check, king to g8, but here white definitely has to capture this unpleasant bishop on f6, so rook captures on f6, king captures on h7, e-pawn is passed, so maybe rook to f3 would probably follow, e2, rook to e3, and the game is equal. Okay, let's go back to our game. So now you see how double-edged the position is. It's not easy to find the correct continuation, even for the grandmasters. So in the game, d pawn captures knight on c3. Check is the threat, so white has to do something about it. Well, recapturing is not a good option. After b pawn captures on c3, then bishop to d3 again is winning for black. So white plays b3, keeping the b file close. Black plays bishop to d3, and here white had the last opportunity to play knight to f6. But instead, white plays queen to h3, preparing for this knight to f6, of course with triple attack on this pawn on h7, or even pinning the queen if black captures on f6. But this, however, was a fatal loss of tempo. Here black strikes with a nice rook sacrifice. Rook captures pawn on b3, threatening mate on b1. So white has no other option but to capture, so a pawn captures on b3, and now rook goes to a8. This time threatening mate on a1. So king goes to d1, clearing this c1 square for the bishop to defend the check. And now here we have another stunning move. Queen captures knight on h5 check. Now let's see what white can do. Yeah, of course queen is defended, but let's see if queen defends with queen to g4, simply rook to a1 check, bishop to c1, bishop to f4. Okay, queen cannot capture. King to e1 is the only option. Queen captures, queen on g4, rook recaptures, and now bishop to e3. It's gonna be mate no matter what white does. In the game, queen captures queen on h5, rook to a1 check, bishop to c1 defending. And now another stunning move. Rook captures bishop on c1. Well, king cannot go anywhere, so king has to capture. Well, in this position, white resigned the game, because if king captures rook on c1, then bishop goes to f4 check. King has no other options but to go to d1, now c2 check. Again, king can only go to e1, and now c pawn promotes to queen. And now we have mate in 2 no matter what white does. For example, if queen defends on d1, then queen to e3 check, queen to e2, queen e2 checkmate. And if, for example, king goes to f2, then queen to e3 check, king to g2, and queen to g3 is checkmate. Okay, so I hope you like this game. I hope you have learned something from it. If you have any questions, my email is below in the description. Of course, I invite you to visit my Instagram page. That's it for now, and see you soon.